Hello, everyone. I'm Kaylin Walls, and I'm the Vice President of the Louisville Forum. Welcome to our September 2024 program. The Louisville Forum typically meets at noon on the second Wednesday of every month here at Vincenzo's in downtown Louisville. Founded in 1984, the Louisville Forum is proud to be celebrating its 40th year this year. Louisville Forum is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public interest group that address issues that impact our Louisville community. Sometimes we host debates and discussions about contemporary and occasionally controversial issues that impact the greater Louisville community. For more information about the Louisville Forum, our events, to join or to make a reservation, please visit louisvilleforum.org. Today's program is about TARC and the future of public transportation in Louisville. TARC, or the Transit Authority of River City, is the public transit busing system here in Louisville. Every month, hundreds of thousands of Louisville residents take trips on TARC buses. However, ridership on TARC buses has declined considerably in the last decade. In 2012, TARC buses carried more than 16 million riders. In 2019, that number dropped to about 10 million. And between July 2022 and June 2023, that number had fallen to approximately 6 million. This spring, TARC announced that it had to lay off many of its drivers and in recent years, cut underperforming routes. As it stands, TARC is facing approximately a $30 million funding deficit by mid-2026. But why is public transit so important to our city? According to the American Public Transportation Association, every $1 that's invested in public transportation generates about $5 in economic revenue. Every $1 billion invested in public transportation supports and creates approximately 50,000 jobs. Every $10 million in capital investment in public transport yields $30 million in increased business sales. An estimated $39 billion of public transit expenditures flow into the private sectors. Home values are up 24% and higher near public transportation areas than in other areas. And hotels in cities with direct rail access to airports raises about 11% more revenue per room than hotels in cities without. TARC is developing a plan to address these issues in public transit in Louisville. TARC has debuted the 2025 Moving Forward Together plan. This plan is a key strategy to address its challenges and also an important opportunity to redesign Louisville's transit network, to update and innovate service to better match the current and future needs of Louisville residents. Here to discuss TARC's challenges and its future are its leaders Rob Stevens and Alex Posorke. Rob is TARC's Chief Operations Officer. He has over 30 years of private and public sector transit experience in leading systems in Texas and Florida. Rob also provided operational support to system starts and provided technical assistance to transit systems in South Carolina, Maryland, and Tennessee. While in Texas, Rob was selected by the governor's office to serve the Texas Department of Transportation's Commission Public Transportation Advisory Committee and later appointed as chair by the Lieutenant Governor of Texas. Rob is a West Texas native, attended Angelo State University, where he earned an undergraduate in business administration and later a master's in public administration. Rob also later joined the university's faculty as an adjunct and part-time lecturer in political science. We are pleased to welcome Rob with us today. Alex Posorke, joining Rob, is TARC's Marketing and Communications Director. Alex worked as transportation planner and a community advocate, communications director, a campaign manager, and a journalist. Before coming to TARC, his prior work includes transportation planner for the Kentuckiana Regional Planning and Development Agency, and for half a dozen years, he was the executive director of Ride New Orleans, where he led its strategic direction policy, rider participation campaigns, and communications. Alex has a bachelor's in journalism from Webster University and a master's in public administration from Tulane. Welcome, Alex. Thank you all for joining us today. We'd first like to begin today's program by talking a little bit about moving forward and TARC 2025. So I'll give you all the floor to give some opening remarks and to let us know a little bit about that plan.
Thank you, Kaylin. Thank you for having us today. I'm Rob Stevens, TARC's Chief Operating Officer. So thank you for having us today. We're looking forward to sharing information with you about the TARC 2025 concepts and this Moving Together plan. Take your questions and be able to kind of hopefully move forward a discussion that you find, worthwhile and productive today. So I'll hand it over to Alex Posorke to begin the conversation and talk about, hopefully you've got these handouts on the table. They'll walk you through the concepts and kind of this discussion point where we're at, and making these tough choices and the plan we have moving forward to engage in the community and to engage you to help us with your feedback to help us make these decisions moving forward. So Alex, if you'll take us away, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Good afternoon, everybody. Can y'all hear me all right? Wonderful. So we want to start with maybe about an 8 to 10 minute conversation on the TARC 2025 plan, because we think it'll really give everybody the background and then leap into a more open Q&A back and forth, as I know is the habit at these gatherings. So the TARC 2025, as we've said, is TARC's big plan right now. This is it's a network redesign plan, and what network redesign means is it could significantly change what the TARC transit network looks like over the next couple of years, where bus lines are going, how often they come, what streets they go down, everything's up in the air with that. And the reason why TARC has launched into this process is because I think most of us in this room are aware we are facing, as the intro referenced, some very serious financial challenges. We're looking at up to $30 million deficit as we did our financial projections going into the fiscal year 2027. And what that means when you cut down to actual service levels is that compared to what TARC had coming into the beginning of 2024, we're looking at an almost 50% cut of vehicle revenue hours, our shorthand for service, over the next couple of years. TARC just did a significant cutback on June 30th of 20% of our fixed route bus line service. That was a huge cut. It had a huge impact and a negative impact on a lot of the people who rely on TARC every day, but even that is not enough to be able to make up this deficit level that's projected if additional revenue is not found. So the TARC 2025 process says that while TARC has a very talented and dedicated planning team in-house, this isn't a conversation that can happen behind closed doors when you're talking about that level of potential cuts. This is something that you need to be going out to all sectors of the community to say, ultimately, what are the priorities? What are the goals? What is the most important thing that our transportation system needs to be accomplishing? And we need to structure a plan around that. So TARC 2025 is that process, and what we're looking at is to come back to the community probably April or May of 2025 with final proposals. One final proposal will say, this is what TARC we say should look like if we are not able to find that additional revenue. If the only revenue that's available for TARC is the 0.2% occupational tax in Jefferson County, which is what the voters approved back in 1974, and there's been no changes to it since. If that's what's available, plus a little bit of revenue from fares, then we know what our budget is, and this is the level of service that we can provide and where we think that service will be most useful. There'll be a second proposal that says, if the community wants to see additional investments. There's a lot of needs, as I know everybody in this room is very aware of, and always limited dollars, but if the community says that we would like to see additional investment in transit to avoid some of these levels of cuts, we'll have a proposal for how we can best maximize the system to make it work for as many people as possible to really update it for the needs and demands of the Louisville region today. So that's going to come April or May. We'll have draft proposals that'll be released in January, and we would love to come back for January or February meeting if that is of interest to talk about those at that point. Where we are right now is the first phase of the process, and we call it our concepts phase, and at this point absolutely nothing has been decided. It's all about trying to get the facts out to the community as much as possible to have them weigh in on what the priorities are. But if you just do an open-ended process of that, you're going to get lots of information. Some of it will be good, but some of it will be less relevant because you need to have it really informed about the context of what we're facing. So to try and get at that, we've created 3 conceptual ideas of what the TARC network could look like, and that's really what's in these booklets here. On the inset, you see 2 concepts, and these are really designed to show opposite ends of a spectrum for what this question of if we can't find additional revenue, what the network could look like. These two concepts show you two very different priorities. And again, it's important to understand what your priorities are here, because when you're dealing with that level of limited revenue, if you try to do everything, you will end up doing very little. So trying to get a sense of what our priorities should be and what the repercussions of that might be is important for this process. So in that, we have these two concepts. One, over on this side, is what we call our coverage concept. So the idea here is, if the goal for transit in the region is to go everywhere that TARC goes today, to still have that access to some level of service, you would have a coverage concept. You would try and maintain all of that. There's a trade-off with all of these, though, and the trade-off here is that if you have something like that with a significant reduction in operating revenue, you're dealing with a lot less buses that you can put out on the street. So if I'm a transit rider and I'm waiting for a bus that today might come every 30 minutes, that bus is probably going to come once an hour. If I'm waiting for a bus that's coming once every hour, that bus is probably going to come once every 2 hours. So if I miss that bus, chances are I'm not making that trip. So you're going to see, with a system like that, we believe reduced ridership, significantly reduced ridership. You'll see a lot of empty buses when they come, but the buses will be there in terms of that lifeline access if somebody needs it on a given day. The second concept over here on this side is sort of the polar opposite of that. It's what we call the ridership concept. So one thing that TARC hears from stakeholders from time to time is, well, I see a bunch of empty buses out there. What are y'all doing? The ridership concept is the response to that. The ridership concept says, if you don't want to see empty buses, if you want to see a transit system that has full buses that are being used by many, many people, especially in a limited resource, you reinvest those in the places where you know you have the highest demand. And for TARC, that's along our major corridors like Broadway and Bardstown, 4th Street, Dixie Highway, Preston Highway, the Market Frankfurt corridor. These corridors right now are over 50% of TARC's ridership on a given day. So the ridership concept reinvests in those corridors. But the trade-off here is that if you're going to invest in those corridors, areas where we have very little comparative ridership today, and that's areas especially in the East End, like J-Town, Middletown, areas in the South and Southwest where you're maybe on the secondary arterials, basically a lot of areas outside of the Waterson. In a ridership concept, if you're 100% prioritizing that, you're not going to see any service in those areas. And while the ridership is very low in those areas, it's certainly not at zero level. So you're having a major effect on a number of people who do rely on the bus there. And those are hard choices for sure, but we want to be open, honest, transparent about where TARC is at and what some of these decisions could be. So that's those two concepts. And then we have on the back page here what we call the growth concept. So this is getting at that third question, or that second question of, should it be a priority? Is it worth it to the community to see additional investment in transit? And if that is the case, if there is additional funding, we have the growth concept. And this envisions probably a 12% increase in the service hours that we provided coming into 2024. And with just that relatively small amount of service hour increase, you're able to see significant changes. You're able to see basically a hybrid of that ridership and that growth concept. You're able to see that high frequency inside the Waterson core where you know you have the demand, but you're also able to see additional service in our more suburban parts of Jefferson County and southern Indiana, where you've got a lot of growing needs, a lot of growing job centers, and a lot of growing residential areas. So you've got a system that you can grow with as the region continues to expand. And you start to see a lot of crosstown connections we envision. So looking further out, we haven't had service by and large on the Hurstbourne since I think 2008. The growth concept re-envisions you would have a frequent network going down from Norton Brownsboro all the way down to Jefferson Mall that would be able to connect people to a lot of job centers there, be able to make easy transfers. Another outside the Waterson crosstown connection from Dixie Highway corridor over to Jefferson Mall. So all of these areas that would provide much better access, you would see a significant increase in access to economic opportunity, access to educational opportunity, access to healthcare. all the things that you need for day-to-day robust quality of life if you're going to rely on transit. We believe you would see a significant increase in ridership. But there's also a trade-off for that. And that is, with this growth concept, we would be looking, we believe, an estimate of a minimum of additional $50 million annually. And that's every single year that you would need that commitment for that. It's not a one-time grant from Louisville Metro Council. It's, you need to see that sustained investment. So right now, with the occupational tax and a little bit of additional revenue that comes from Indiana and a little bit from the state of Kentucky, we're probably around $85 million. That's our budget for one of these. So 50 million more, that doesn't double it, but it certainly adds a significant amount. So that's the trade-off on that piece. And what we're doing is we've gone to over 150 meetings and gatherings like this since August 1st, where we basically delivered what I just gave to you all, in varying lengths, some shorter, some longer, but asking folks to weigh in on this. The input that we have is primarily going into a survey. You can see the QR code right here, so I would encourage everybody who's interested to use that QR code. There's also a direct link on our website. That data is going to be given directly to the TARC board, and they will be giving directions around the overall parameters for the draft plan. We'll put that draft plan together with our consultants. And again, we'll be coming back in January and February to say, okay, community, this is what we heard. Now here's what we're proposing. Did we get it right? And we'll have a little bit of back and forth over those couple of months, and then we'll come back in the spring, as I said. So, Rob, if you got anything to add, but.
No, I think Alex did a great job of covering that for you guys. So, we are in a period of austerity now, trying to, my focus has been to be a good steward of the funds we have now, and deliver great services for what we have now, so that we can demonstrate that we are providing value to the community. I'll give you an example of what we've done. When I arrived here, it was February last year, we did a community value survey. And so that community value survey generates something called a Net Promoter Score. One of the things that Net Promoter Score told us was, it's one of those things, you get a Net Promoter Score like a Google review, right? So you get a 5-star or 3-star. So one of the things they tell you is like, would you recommend TARC to someone to ride? And they absolutely, I think most people said yes. But one of the things they said, or a couple of things they said that I focused on was, we would do that a little more, Rob, if you had cleaner bus stops, if you had safer, more secure buses that looked cleaner, were safer and secure at bus stops and ride the bus. So we did that. So it was one of the things that we did. We focused on that. You should see cleaner bus stops. You should see bus stops that are adequate. The shelters are clean. They're not. There's no graffiti on them. We've helped work with Louisville Metro to try to make sure we're deterring unwanted activity at those things. So that's been my focus for a while, is to make sure that while we're operating now, that we're demonstrating being good stewards of the dollars that we have now, making sure that we're implementing the services that you need, that we're on time, we're reliable, we're safe, we're secure, and it's something that you would recommend or you'd want to ride. So one of those things that's going to be a tough decision for us is, as Alex was describing, the one thing we can't address right now is the frequency of trips, because the more frequency, folks want to be able to ride places and get where they want to go as quickly as you can get there in your car. So this is one of the things this addresses. If we choose a plan that's not a ridership plan and have a growth plan, you won't be able to get where you want to be frequently. So if you can get there in your car in 15, 20 minutes, you should expect the same frequency or less in a bus. So, if you can't do that, it's going to be tougher for us to demonstrate value to us if we can't be reliable and we can't get you there on time. So that for me is just one area that's a little bit challenging for us as we go forward, and we can answer questions about any kind of challenges that we're experiencing now, but we're doing the best that we can to make sure that we are providing value to the community, that we are doing the best that we can with the dollars that we have, and we're being good stewards of those, and giving you the best possible service and products we can. They're safe, they're reliable, and they're secure, and we're getting you the places we need to go. But going forward, we do have tough decisions to make. We certainly do. So if we're open to, if we're ready for questions, be glad to take your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Rob and Alex, for giving us that overview of TARC 2025. Lawrence, we can go ahead and get started with audience questions, and please remember to fill out those question sheets on your tables.
Let's start with a bit of a history lesson. You talked about a up to $30 million deficit. How did TARC get there?
I can begin this one, and Alex, you might have to help me along the way. So this $30 million deficit didn't happen overnight, obviously. This is something that was incremental over a period of 20 to 30 years. So when this began, maybe 20, and we'll start with 20 or 25 years, it could be where our operational deficit was something very small. Our grant funding, our program at the federal level allows us to flex money from, for example, we have capital. Most of our federal funds are capital only. You could probably not make a repair this year on something, or not buy a bus this year or something, and that $1 million worth of something that would buy a bus or make a repair on something could be used to operate. So that's something that we did over the years, was maybe defer some maintenance, defer a vehicle purchase or something like that. So that got us along for several years. But as the deficit grew, as inflation tackled us, and as employees, we have great benefits and we have a great set of employees. So we're trying to be a very good workplace and attract the best people. So as our expenses grew in those categories for operating, it became difficult to make that trade-off. So it was not just one bus or one small repair, maybe 2 or 3 buses and a major repair. So along came, if there could be any silver lining in finding what happened during the pandemic, was this opportunity for 2 things. One, that transit workers and transit community were defined as essential workers, which is a big plus. So it was something that we all know is very much needed. Public transit workers were defined as essential workers, but there was this federal money that we call, it had several different names, but it was COVID relief funds that could be used to operate. And so we did that for 4 to 5 years. So we escalated to that time back in 2020 where we could use those funds to operate. So we're trying to ask the hard questions now, because we're arriving at this space where those funds will be depleted in the next year and a half or 2, and so we will need a plan to operate within our means. And so it was something that began a long time ago, and we're beginning to tackle it now. Alex.
And I would just put an addendum onto that with the federal emergency COVID funding that Rob's referring to, that came, first wave right in spring of 2020 as everything was going down. If COVID had not come, we would have been having this exact same conversation about 4 years ago exactly. So that enabled us to have a little bit of breathing room to provide service when it was desperately needed to make sure essential workers were getting to work in the depths of the pandemic. And then as the region was coming out of the pandemic, to be able to provide the same level of service to get people to work as people were coming out of that. But it postponed the conversation, but that's where we are now.
A couple of drill down questions on this. Was it over time a lack of forward thinking that precipitated this crisis, or what was it? Is there anything you could have done over the past few years to prevent where you are now?
That's a very good question, and that's a little bit of a. So I would answer it this way. I think that everyone in a leadership position did everything they absolutely could at the time to address the situation. I think it got away from us very quickly, with the COVID money, the gift of the COVID money, we bought some time there. So we bought some time to have this discussion that we're having now. We probably should have had this discussion 4 or 5 years ago. And we may have, but whatever circumstances were our operating environment or whatever environment we were in, we had multiple targets or priorities to try to address. So we probably could have had this discussion 4 or 5 years ago, but I can assure you that discussion's happening now. We're having it at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level.
One more from me, and I'll turn it over to Ron. This question from the audience, asking the reasons for the drop in demand by potential TARC customers. Is it poor on-time service, safety issues? Why are fewer people riding?
That's a great question. So I'll answer it this way. So it's not just something that's happening in Louisville. I think it's a national trend. Transit has become something less used over time. I will answer it back this way. I think there's a combination of those. A resulting factor is if your bus line becomes less safe, if it's viewed as less safe, less clean, less secure, and if it's not frequent service, those are obvious reasons for not to choose transit. So I think it's not something that's just a Louisville-only problem. It is a national trend where transit is just being less used over time. I think some transit agencies nationally have addressed it specifically by doing some very unique strategies that they've used to try to augment services and attract riders, current riders, and attract new ridership. There are a lot of those, and we're looking at them now. When we get that opportunity to move into a growth plan, we'll be ready to launch some of those strategies to help attract new riders and help keep some of the same riders that are here. Just like I explained to you about the Net Promoter Score and the Community Value Survey, we tackled some of those things immediately. Some of those things were low-lying fruit. What can we do to help people that are using the system now to keep using it and attract new riders? So it was simple. Just keep the stops safe and clean, keep them amenable, keep them great, and keep the buses moving along. So we're doing that kind of thing now. But when we do arrive at the point when we can, and we are hopeful that that point will come in the next couple, 2 or 3 years, that we can move into a growth situation, we'll have strategies and tactics that we can deploy to help attract new ridership. We can learn from others that have deployed these things nationally, attract new ridership and keep the ridership that we have moving along and wanting to use the bus system instead of their personal car.
I might add to that. Yesterday, I was staffing our executive director at a podcast interview, and we went into the office building. I saw a chart in the room we were going where it just had who was in the office on which day. And I think the boss of that agency was there all 5 days, but for folks beneath there, I was trying to count, and I saw at most 2 days a week in that office. So the whole work from home situation with the pandemic is very different depending on what industry you're in, depending on what city you're in. It affects everybody very differently, but it is definitely a factor of that, and it's something that's still, frankly, working itself out, I think, for a lot of transportation projections moving forward, and that's a big piece of it as well.
I have one quick follow-up, Ron, before. Rob, you mentioned strategies that other cities have used to attract new riders. Can you describe some of those strategies that other comparable transportation systems have utilized?
Well, sure, certainly. So I'll key off of what Alex just said, and thanks, Alex. That was a great catch. So our travel patterns have changed. So as travel patterns change, you have people still working at home. What do you do to kind of attract new riders, and how do you keep the current riders in place? So there are some small things that you can do. There are, aside from your normal fixed route, which runs along your major routes, there are small ways you can provide on-demand services. We have a couple of zones now that we're operating an experimental pilot project. A lot of systems kind of engage where you use smaller kind of zoned approaches to helping these small communities to get around in their local areas in these zones. And you focus on people using it for other reasons than going to work, recreational events, those type of things. So I know the general manager up in Utah, I think they really focused on focusing on evening activities, weekend activities, event planning kind of activities. So doing those kinds of things and shifting how you use your resources to meet your customers' needs. So yes, absolutely. In this environment where you have work at home, people still want to get out, and yeah, you don't want to be held hostage in your home, but after work activities, evening, weekends, and event kind of things, as I've seen, as a way to shift that focus for people using the service.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Ron?
Good afternoon. There was an audience question regarding comparable sized cities and the strategies they use, as well as an audience question regarding special events such as Derby and Bourbon and beyond. But both of these audience members asked, how realistic are these strategies if you all don't get the bump or the increase to the budget that you're looking for?
Yeah, Alex, go ahead. You take this one.
I mean, I can be pretty plain. We've been talking with a lot of our peers, and I'll highlight Cincinnati, I'll highlight Indianapolis, and I'll highlight Richmond, all conversations we've had, and none of those agencies are having the issue we're having right now, because all of them, in Cincinnati and Indiana's case, or Indianapolis's case, they did referendum in the late teens to raise taxes. And they have more funding available now for transit. Richmond got a significant increase in what the state of Virginia was providing, and they are not having funding issues. The issues we're seeing are of increased labor and service costs, and not a corresponding increase in terms of available revenue is happening everywhere. And it's not an easy answer, but it's the answer as you're looking in the other places. And there's certainly things you can do that can change around the margins. And we're definitely doing a lot of research and having a lot of conversation about that. But at its heart,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just about taking your system in your community and making, being aware of some of the options that you might have to deliver services. Just looking at your customers and what your customers want and designing a system that can meet that need around whatever means that you have. We just haven't had the opportunity to do that until now.
This combines a couple of questions. What percentage of your funding comes from the states of Kentucky and Indiana? And along with that, has Frankfurt expressed any interest in helping fund what you're calling the growth plan or increasing your revenue from the state end?
Absolutely. I'll let Alex, you've kind of helped us lead some of those discussions and bringing us together. Please take that question.
I'll start with Kentucky. Kentucky is 46th in the nation in terms of supporting transit. So right now, we don't have high levels of funding from state, and we don't have consistent levels of funding from the state. So we have an ability each budget cycle to ask for a specific amount of money that typically goes for what we call our local match. For those who are unfamiliar, federal transportation funding typically requires a 20% local match that can come from a local or a state source. So typically we're able to ask for that 10%. In recent years, we've been able to get that. I think in this year, we've actually gotten a little bit more, and we're able to ask for a second one. In the depths of the pandemic, one year we got $300,000 from them. I think this year we're looking at a little over $3 million from them. So, but we cannot project in terms of our budget what we're getting from the state. And this is something that Ozzie Gibson, our new executive director, spent a lot of time in Frankfurt this session educating about the situation that TARC faces, and we continue to have conversations there about are there other ways to look at this moving forward. Regarding Indiana, so the only funding that comes dedicated from the state of Indiana is a formula fund that NDOT provides to transit agencies. It's based on your, let's see if I can do this right, vehicle revenue miles traveled, your population, and your ridership. It works out to, in recent years, about $1.2 million. So that's more or less around 1 or 2% of our operation budget right there. We also have a small amount of fares. By and large, the money that supports TARC locally, again, it all primarily comes from that Jefferson County occupational tax.
I'm going to combine 3 different questions and turn it into a totally different question.
Right. Okay.
There was a question as to why TARC is not focusing specifically on employees and making sure employees can get to work and working with employers. There was a question on why TARC doesn't focus specifically with schools to design routes to provide greater access to both public and private school students. And there was a question on why TARC doesn't focus on tourism and to work with the tourism industry. So lots of different thoughts as to places where TARC can focus. How does TARC balance all of these thoughts and ideas when formulating a plan?
I'll try to tackle that higher level. If I need some help, I probably will. I'll ask Alex to boot in and help me with this one. So you asked kind of 3 separate categories of questions, and I'll look at them from a customer perspective: students, workers, and what was the other? Special events and stuff. So I'll take that one first. So special events are usually what we call a charter type of service. So you have a very robust offering here for charter service to provide that service for special events. So we have to be, very deliberate and careful about how we approach that and offer the services that we can within our budget, but not take away from the opportunity for a private sector charter service to offer that same service, because we'll be using tax money to provide that service and taking a local profit out of their pocket. So we have to be careful about that, but it's not something that's undoable. We can do that kind of thing. We just have to be careful how we approach that. So there's a way to do that. With schools, I'll address that. So we do have, from what I understand, many of our routes in the past, I've talked to lots of people that used to take TARC to school. So when there was a larger network that was more robust, there was almost always a line that went either nearby or in close proximity of a school, and it was frequent enough where it made sense. You could take the bus to school. over the years that's been deteriorated as we've tried to, scale back service little by little. So that has, that's kind of scaled back little by little, but it's most certainly something that's possible, and it's something that's done in every system across the nation, is that you do supplement school service with regular bus service because you're providing service along a route that has a proximity nearby a school. As you do know now, we are kind of supporting in an unusual, very unique way. We are currently supporting the school system, the JCPS, with their need for employees and our need to kind of have a place to hold our employees so that when we do get back to a place of resiliency, we can bring back those employees to bring full service back. So and the last one was workers. So there are some unique service delivery methods that we can provide for workers. I mentioned one briefly a little bit ago, was the microtransit thing. So you can develop little pockets of areas to kind of get people to a fixed route or point to point within zones. But one even more that's probably not as well known, it is the van pooling option that we work with KIPTA, which is our planning organization for our region. So there are opportunities for an employer to engage the van pooling option, allow a worker to have one of those vans and to carpool with their folks, and it be subsidized by both the employer, the employee, and public transit dollars. So those are three high level. Alex, did I miss anything?
No, but can I bring it
Yes,
even
you
higher
can.
level?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you can.
So I want to bring it back to the question that TARC 2025 is asking, because those are values questions. What are the values? What should the transit agency provide? So think about jobs, for instance. If you're looking at a heat map of the region of where your job centers are, you're going to see downtown, you're going to see U of L, you're going to see around UPS, you're going to see maybe Bluegrass Commerce Park, you're going to see Riverport. Let's stop right there for this exercise. So those 5 areas. A ridership concept would be something that provides regular, reliable transit access to all of these places coming from areas of high demand. And that is a very legitimate goal, but it's important to recognize, especially in a reduced frequency, reduced resource situation. If you are to choose something like that, you are probably not then able to have some of the coverage that we have. And that's the balance that this process is all about, and that is not an easy choice. It is easy to say we should support major employers and get people to jobs. But what does that trade-off look like? And that's really one of the things at the heart of the conversation we're having, that we're asking the community to weigh in on right now.
You mentioned van pools. There's a question about, can TARC use smaller van-type vehicles to save money, increase safety, et cetera, instead of using full-size buses, which often run empty?
So that's a common question about the empty bus. I'm glad you asked that. There's not an easy answer for it, but here's my personal view about empty buses. So you're going to need, if you want to access in the coverage, it's about access. So you've got to provide some sort of, as you would in a road network. There are road networks sometimes to your house that aren't used very often, right? So they're not used very often, but you have to have access to them. So you provide that in the vehicle. It's not the vehicle that costs the money. It's the labor to operate the vehicle. So whether it's a small bus or a big bus, it's just a capacity issue. You have a much easier way to adjust your capacity if you have more people all of a sudden need to ride. But it's not the vehicle operating costs that are the problem. It's the person operating the vehicle cost that remains the same. That's just as expensive to operate a small vehicle as it is a larger vehicle. There are some small advantages to gain and cost and maintain a small vehicle as opposed to a large one, but that's hotly debated between maintenance folks. So there is this problem with the empty bus, but I would lead you to go back and think about the road network system. It's basically the same. So you have a road network is a fixed asset that helps you get where you want to go. A bus is a mobile asset that helps you get where you need to go. So you're looking at an access kind of ability to provide access in a transportation network. And so you're going to have the trade-off is you will have empty buses if you're looking at trying to provide that access with a larger bus. Right? Yeah, okay.
A follow-up question to that. What about micro transportation services such as scooters? There have been private companies that have occupied that space here in Louisville. Is that something TARC can explore as a revenue generator?
I think we can definitely explore all these options. As revenue generators, I'd be hesitant to say it would be a solution to get us to solvency. But most definitely, we should be integrating and cooperating and, engaging other modes and other types of transportation systems. I was just talking to Ozzy a couple of months back. It seems time flies by, but there are those opportunities like the scooters, but there's also opportunities for regional connectivity with other operators or the intercity bus like Greyhound. And those might be a bigger, with the intercity travel, that might be a bigger revenue generator. We could act as a revenue agent for them and, sell tickets and earn a commission on that. So that's probably in the revenue generation side a much better way to get us where you get an exchange and you get dollars in your pocket to operate your system. But the smaller things like the scooters and things, they would just be a convenience and a way to connect people in a different way that they need to connect and attract more riders to your system. But as a revenue generator, to help you get to a solvency point, I think that would be kind of a neutral point on that item. But beneficial and most definitely sought after.
There was a couple of questions about, or I guess the audience members were a little bit concerned about the quality of service based upon the proposal, the 2025 proposal. So there was a specific question about, are there anticipated concerns with the timeliness of the buses based upon the changes? And there was also a question about, for example, riders with disability issues, if you anticipate any impact based upon the issues with the budget and ridership.
Alex, take
Yeah.
both those. So regarding the service quality, the idea of the ridership concept has buses that only come every 15 minutes, 4 buses an hour, or only come every 30 minutes, 2 buses an hour minimum. So for service quality, that's what you want, because if a bus is broken down or a bus is late or whatever it is, it's okay because another bus is going to be coming along shortly. If you're looking at much less frequency, if you're looking at every hour or 2, that's where you've got to be really on your game as the transit agency to make sure that thing is running like clockwork. But I'll tell you, you can't make it run like clockwork. Something is always going to happen. I take the bus about half the time, and the other day the bus that I normally take, the Preston Highway, was running a little bit late. So why is it running late? I got on, there was a man in a large, one of those large mechanical wheelchairs, and I don't know if he wasn't quite all there, if there was a drug issue, but either way, he was saying a lot of things to people, and as he got off the bus, he spent a while just sort of going like this, and it took him about 5 minutes to get off the bus, and I said, oh, this is why my bus was late today, because they probably stopped a couple stops back to load him on. It took that long, now it's loading him off. You can't predict something like that, so predictability is frequency in transit, and a coverage network would be much less reliable, though obviously TARC would do everything we could to make sure we were as reliable as possible and do a lot of tactics to make that work. I'm glad regarding the other question that somebody asked that regarding individuals with disabilities, because there's something we haven't addressed in the conversation yet today, but that's around TARC 3 service. So that's our paratransit service. The Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990 mandated that paratransit is provided by transit agencies if you are an individual with a disability that precludes you from riding the fixed route system, and you're within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route line, and you're going to a destination that's also within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route line, we have to provide you paratransit service. Now, it's an unfunded mandate, so there's no additional money that comes from that. We just have to do it. And we're happy to do that, but it's important to note that on a ridership concept, that federal guarantee of that paratransit service would not be a guarantee anymore. You wouldn't have that federal right there. Now, no decisions have been made. That's ultimately a larger direction the board has to give as we move further into this process. But it is one potential impact that could happen from something like a ridership network that could impact that community.
You talked about labor costs. Are self-driving vehicles a part of the equation in the future?
Not in the immediate future, but most definitely. I mean, technology has been a great benefit and used in the transit agency all across the nation. We are adding some new technology to our system. It'll be on-bus technology, but I don't think we're going to be in the next, I don't see the next 5 to 10 years autonomous vehicles becoming something that we're going to be using. But there are some systems across the nation. I think in Jacksonville, Florida, Nate Ford there they've got a system. They're putting autonomous vehicles in the system, but they're very well funded, and they have a large planning group, and they're the community has embraced the transit system for several decades. So they're kind of way ahead of us. So any autonomous vehicle implementation here may be a little while longer for us to get to.
TARC, of course, is heavily reliant on public funding. Beyond bus advertising, is there any role for private sector investment in public transportation, and how would that look?
That's a great question. So there are a lot of ways to partner with a transit system. I don't think we've had time to explore all of them since I've arrived. I mean, we opened the book to find those out. I mentioned one a little bit earlier. What would a partnership look like with the intercity bus line? So those are things that other systems do across the nation, but it makes sense. So it's something that you can do to provide a coordination between systems, intercity, provide facilities. So it's a network of opportunity. It depends on what those are. So I think a system like ours and across the nation, they're always open to partnerships with the private sector. I know Alex is working on our partnership programs on ways to do cost shares to expand services. So we do have a mechanism now where we have a partnership program where Alex has been taking care of bringing in our partners and doing a cost share, revenue share with them to operate a service out there that's beneficial for our partners. So that's one way we're doing now. We could build on that in the future. But anything more innovative, we probably would love to sit down with any partner to help us move forward on that one.
And I'll add to that, and I don't know the specific mechanics of this, but I know there are examples in other cities of more direct investment. I know Children's Hospital in Seattle directly invested in, I believe, the bus line that was serving their campus to make sure that the frequency was at a level that worked for their employees. I know in Cleveland, they brought the Health Line, which was a bus rapid transit line, was partnering with a lot of the health industry, the hospitals there. Again, I don't, in my head right now, have the exact details on the mechanics, but there are examples in some other cities throughout the country where people have looked at some interesting potential ways to move forward with that.
Absolutely.
There were several questions regarding ridership and ways to increase ridership, and ultimately about customer comfort. Combining three questions, one of which referred to TARC cleanliness, one of which referred to safety concerns, and another one referred to, frankly, understanding the routes, and made a comparison to being in Chicago and knowing, hey, these stops all connect, and knowing where the stops are, and a lack of knowledge about that. Should you get the budget you need and the resources you need, what steps does TARC see, or what you all have inherited in terms of what you see in terms of steps to create that confidence and comfort with riders?
I'll take this one and help me fill that out. So hopefully I've introduced what we're doing now. So, we did have a community value survey, found out what folks wanted from us, and we responded with a strategy to help bring whatever resources we could to fix that problem at bus stops and on the buses. So we do have a safety ambassador program. We have a private sector, the same group that are helping us clean the shelters. We launched a pilot where at stops, at certain hotspots where we had some challenges, we had this group kind of tackle that for us. So we would continue to do that. What we're doing is this pilot with our contractor ends. We're spending this last month with them to teach our road supervisors some of the strategies so we can emulate some of the things that they're doing. So we're taking our field staff and redirecting how they do that to pay attention to safety, to pay attention to security and cleanliness, and just learning how to communicate better, change some process, procedure, do a better job at that. So we're doing some of that now. What we're doing as well now is on the buses, I mentioned this earlier, we have some onboard technology. It's called the Veil system. So it proves to provide the agency with better information about what we're doing. People demand, from us, metrics and analysis of, who's using the bus, where you're going. We're going to have a better opportunity with this new information gathering system on our buses, but it'll also help the community, our customers, we'll be able to communicate with them where the bus stops are. It'll have enunciators that'll be able to speak in possibly a different language or be able to pronounce stops and let you know where you're going. With that will be amenities for passengers, displays, passenger information displays that will be on route to be able to show you kind of like wayfinding, be able to show you what the next bus is coming and those kinds of things. So we do have, on that note, we do have a couple of those things. You'll see some tall pylons, some blue ones. That was one of my first projects, was to try to get those fixed. So it'll be a lot like that, but they'll be kind of off-the-shelf kind of things that'll work with our current technology. So as those things, we're working with those. We do have things in place that are doing that, and we would just augment that and continue trying to bring the customer the best value we can and help you make that easy decision that TARC is a reliable, comfortable, safe, secure system to get you where you want to go.
If I can
Yeah, most certainly, please.
add to that, there's one other ingredient I think that is just absolutely key, though, and that's the frequency and does it go where you want to go. So I live in Shelby Park, and I used to work at Kipped Out in J-Town. I did not take the bus when I worked at Kipped Out in J-Town because it would have required 3 transfers, and it would have taken me about 2 hours to get out there, if everything went right, and another 2 hours to get home. Meanwhile, I got on the interstate, and I got out there in, I don't speed, so I got out there in 19 minutes. Right now, I work at TARC, and I take the bus any day that I don't have to do meetings like this or get around the community. I'm going to take the bus, and if things go right, that's going to take me about 20 minutes. 2 transfers, up Preston, up Jackson, and then transfer on Broadway, and there I am. So that's an easy choice for me because those buses come frequent, and it goes from where I am to where I want to go. And if we can't provide that to certain areas, it's going to be really hard for people to make that decision.
Has there been any surveys to assess the voters' mood in increasing taxes to support TARC? And along with that, any plans for a marketing campaign to help sway voter interest in this?
Alex? Yeah.
So at this point, we are having this conversation with the community. I mean, Rob and I are public servants. We're within the government. We are not in a position where we personally can be lobbying for this. So our role, as we see it right now, is really laying out the facts for where TARC is at and what will happen depending on what choice we make. Now, what the community wants to see, what different interest groups might want to see once we have a draft proposal out there will be interesting to see. But from our perspective, it's about providing that information and saying if this is something that we do want to see, this is what this could look like.
I'm surprised this hasn't come up before now, but what about rail transit? Is that part of Louisville's public transportation future? What would it take to make that happen? And what about even trams or trolley cars downtown as part of this whole mix?
I'll kick it off. That's definitely a long-term planning solution. So it's definitely in the mix, but it would be in a category of a long-term plan, which is, long-term plans are usually around 15 to 20 years. So definitely part of the mix. It should be for a city this size and a community wanting a robust system. It most certainly is. Everywhere I've been, it's been part of the discussion point. Alex?
And I would just say that's been a community conversation in the past here. There was proposals in the early 2000s around considering that, and I'm relatively new to the region, but as I understand it, there was a decision that the Ohio River Bridges project would be, for the time being, a better investment and the priority investment. And that's a fine decision for the community to make, but again, if you're going to do something like light rail, that's a significant investment and has to be a major regional priority to find that level of investment.
Absolutely.
This question might be a little bit more fun for you guys. Putting aside the obvious constraints, being that you have passion about your work, in an ideal state, what does the future state look like for public transportation in Louisville?
I don't know. I think it'd be amazing. We'd have everything we ever asked for, everything we ever wanted. So I don't know. I think we're laying the groundwork and setting the table for a future TARC now today. So I think we have good synergy going forward. We got a great plan. We got great staff. We got a new executive director. So I think we're working the right direction to do all the things that we need to do to set the table now to prepare for a feast in the future, is the best way I put it. So, Alex, do you have any comments about that?
No, I would say as a transit rider, I of course gravitate personally towards things like the growth concept. But I think for TARC, the most important thing is just having these conversations and really having a consensus among the community after an open conversation about what it is that we want the transit system to be, and recognizing that especially with limited funding, it cannot be all things, so having that consensus around what those priorities should be.
How much time we have left, Caitlin? One more or two
You
more?
have time for one more question, I think.
Okay. Then I'll ask it this way. Again, give us your timeline going forward for the redesigned TARC. What are your deadlines, and when will the public have some information about what you're looking at?
Go ahead, Alex.
So we will have this survey, this closes on the 20th of September, next Friday. So we encourage everybody to take the survey. If you have an organization and you want to submit something more formal, a letter, please submit that as well about what you think. So all of that information will be weighed. The TARC Board of Directors will give larger parameters around what the course of the draft plan should be. We'll work on that with our consulting team over the fall, and then we'll release that at some point in January. We'll have another round of community engagement over January and February to say this is what we heard, what did we get right, what did we get wrong. We'll take that feedback and do anywhere from minor tweaks to major adjustments to that draft plan based on that feedback, and we'll have a formal plan then April or May as our current timeline goes. Once that's there, it's not something where you can just flip a switch and overnight change the system. If you're doing significant changes to the system, you're likely changing, for instance, we have almost, I think, 3,900 bus stops throughout the region. So if we are changing all of the signs on all of those bus stops, that's a pretty heroic feat, and that takes some time to plan, that takes some time to put together. So I would say we'd be looking at the earliest, the first half of 2026, depending on what the TARC finances look like for an implementation there of a constrained network. Now, obviously, there's then the question of the growth concept. Is that something the community wants to see? And I think that's something we have to sort of see how that conversation develops in the coming months before anybody could really speculate there. But that would be the rough timeline for that. And certainly we've projected, within a couple of months of July 1, 2026 is when that fiscal cliff would really hit. So if that projection holds up, and fiscal projections sometimes are more conservative or less conservative depending, so you have to see as you get closer, but certainly changes would need to be made based on those original projections by fall of 2026.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Rob, any final thoughts before we close our program today?
No, I don't have any. Thank you for having us. We're glad for the invite, glad to be here. So hopefully if you've got more questions, just send me an email.
Thank you all. Thank you all again for joining us. So glad to have you. And stay tuned for our October program that'll be announced in the coming week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.